Szeretettel üdvözlöm Önöket, és nagyon köszönöm a meghívást erre a konferenciára. Sokszor szoktam beszélni a magyar-kínai, illetve
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. It is my pleasure to be invited. I often attend conferences like this with the same subject, as what environment impacts is the subject matter may have. I was a bit surprised, but now I'm not at all. If I think about just why it might be interesting for an environment protection organization or agency. While I was preparing or getting up for this conference, I was planning on telling you about what impact China and Chinese investment have or has. May I just tell you briefly, generically, about how China works together with the region. It was when the then Prime Minister Csaba visiting Hungary when the cooperation began. It was not then or not yet officially announced or advertised, so to say, that a new initiative or new arm is extended to Hungary and the rest of the region. But then there was a conference held where regional issues were about to be discussed, and this was implemented. This apparently became true. And this forum was used for the Prime Minister of China to announce that they will extend 1 billion of a loan, which I'll drive back on. It was in 2012, a year after, that is. The very same Prime Minister, when Csaba visited Poland in Warsaw, where he already, by then, officially advertised or announced that the countries of the region, the 16 countries of the region and China, be involved, later to be extended by Greece, to be part of the cooperation between the 17 and the People's Republic of China. Something the Western or older part of the European Union were not very happy about, were not very applauding to, because China was embarking on a cooperation with a region where there are 11 countries that are member states, but 5 are not member states, i.e. a non-existing economic setup, something which was not at all applauded by, as I said, by the EU, and apparently the borders between these countries are smeared. And it was in the same year of 2012, wherein that in Beijing the economic ministry convened or invited the military attaché, the commercial attachés of the countries in Beijing. So I was lucky to represent Hungary then. And it was at this particular conference where the management, the leadership of the ministry told us that the objective of this initiative is that there are numbers of projects to be implemented, and tens of billions of dollars are being offered by China to be used for investment. This is a giant amount. This is certainly a matter of intent, nowhere else typed up officially. By the way, between us, the overall amount or total amount did reach this amount of 10 billion US dollars. What does matter is that it was then when China did offer a loan on favorable terms, just to sponsor or finance railroads, motorways, public edifices, mines, power plants, even renewable energy plants, or conventional, doesn't matter. This is the basic objective of this loan on favorable terms. Something something that China was not expecting at all, and notably that the financing and other laws of the EU when it comes to external financing, it is not permitted, so to say, let alone for some extreme situations. There are public procurements that to be invited, so it's not at all for sure that in EU member countries a public procurement may result in a best bid by a Chinese proposal. Also, disallowed or illegal state sponsorship is also something that is not allowed. Notably, if China is backing up and is of support, then it will be disqualified and disallowed. So in the EU, it is not permitted to use such funds. Generally speaking, in the Union member countries, infrastructure projects, especially here in Central Eastern Europe, these types of grants might sound okay, but not welcome in the EU. Especially when a grant that is not to be repaid is certainly better than any credit, even on favorable terms. Well, let alone the idea of organizations and companies that are interested and vastly interested, very much so, in infrastructural investment projects. So, in the 11 member countries, it was out of the question, except for one company in Poland that did manage to contract for a 40 or so kilometer motorway, but they had to go out of their way to come up with best bids, and after all, the project was a bust, and it never ever became true. So certainly no such project became true in the 11 member countries. However, many of these projects did or were implemented in non-member countries. Why? Because there are no public procurement limitations in those countries. There is no financing or state support limitations. Practically speaking, we are talking about bilateral state limitations. For example, Albania, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, Kosovo. It did happen repeatedly that coal-based power stations and motorways were built. Also, renewable energy-based power plants using Chinese money or funds are in the process of making. That is what the difference was. Initially offered to 11 plus so much. Okay, so what I'm saying is that offered for 11 member countries and 5 non-member countries, a host of funds was offered, but never implemented in any member countries. Now, starting with Hungary, if we just follow through, we know all too well that the People's Republic of China was established in 1949, and ever since then, we have had diplomatic relations with Hungary. History clearly says that while Hungary used to be a socialist country, we were exchanging goods and commodities based on ruble, Soviet ruble, and there were commercial activities on commodities as allowed for CMEA countries. That came to a halt at the end of the 80s, and after the political regime was changed, the mutual commercial activities were then based on a dollar accounting system, and certainly there was quite a niche or a hitch. Or delay, should I say. And in Hungary, no foreign investment was typical at all, while even after the early 90s, or in the early 90s, or even in the 90s themselves, commerce was very low. Up until in 2002, the then foreign relations minister did acknowledge or recognize, should I say, that that China is a potential partner, and Deng Xiaoping opened a new horizon, a new avenue of opening up. So we in Hungary started building active relations actively, both in investment areas and economic areas, and any subsequent Hungarian government did participate since 2002, since 2002. Each Hungarian government has recognized the fact that and acknowledged the fact that it's good to work together closely with China. So much so that in 2011, the Orbán government did announce and started a new Eastern horizon while opening two Eastern countries, and the commercial activities achieved quite a volume, and we have. It is safe to say that it's a very steady commercial volume right now, and we in the region are a leading exporter toward China. But out of the Central Eastern European countries, in terms of exports, we are one of the leading countries. And may I also admit that it's very much thanks to Audi manufacturing engines, motors, car engines, to be assembled here and then exported to China, where they are assembled again and incorporated in cars. So definitely it constitutes certainly more than half of our exports. Now, in terms of what investment, or should I say what economic activities or commercial activities started in Hungary attributable to China, number one, the Bank of China opened in 2003. In the recent or last 5 years, it opened further affiliates in Budapest, Vienna, Prague, and Belgrade, as well as in Bucharest, and they are working on opening an affiliate in Ljubljana, Slovenia. It was in 2004 where, based on a bilateral agreement, the Chinese-Hungarian bilingual primary school was established in Budapest, something that is a unique educational institution. Between Beijing and Budapest, direct flights were opened by Hainan, and it was in 2000. It had been in 2001 already when Hainan made an effort to buy themselves into Maliv Hungarian Airlines, trying to keep Maliv alive, but it never became true, and Maliv never managed to survive. However, further investors appeared, like, for example, Huawei. Huawei is a brand name, is a well-known brand name for everyone, but when they first entered Hungary in 2005 or so, they were not very well known because their devices, personal devices, were not that well known, but they are right now. They invested in Hungary in the recent years, Huawei, that they apparently moved their supply center in Europe in Hungary, and they also operate production lines in Hungary, although this is contract making only. On a contract job basis or contract making. Also, Manhua Industries, that is a chemical giant, is also present on Hungarian soil, setting their sight on Borsodchem in 2009, Wahua is probably used to be the fifth largest chemical company, with 2 German and 2 US rival companies, and they wanted to make it to the pedestal to be one of the best 3. They needed European production lines, so they set their eyes on they spotted Borsodchem to be bought up. And by the way, Borsodchem was in 2009 doing very shabbily, close to bankruptcy, using a lot of state funds. And all of a sudden, a foreign investor arrives in the person of Wanhua. And how should I put it? I view it this project as one is of my own kin, my own brainchild, because when Wanhua demonstrated interest toward Borsodchem, they in Borsodchem was a bit scared or fearful about the buyout, so they came to my office in my capacity as commercial advisor, the Wanhua management. With a delegation trying to convince me that they are trying to make more jobs and wishing to operate a European production plant consistently and continuously. The government of the time in Hungary did understand and nodded and showed green light, and I think they are in Borsodchem, as purchased by one who are doing pretty well. They are state-of-the-art, and they are creating jobs, and they're paying in a lot of taxes to the central budget. So it's a money-making project. It's a very profitable project. Let me tell you about the Bohang Group, one that actually made it to Hungary as a manufacturer of car parts. And what you may want to know is that they purchased Westcast, a Canadian group of companies who then already had an affiliate, a representative office in Hungary. So the Chinese bought up the Canadian group, and at the same time they certainly bought up the Hungarian affiliates. So they then had a car part manufacturing plant in Hungary. And I think it was 6 years ago, relative to 6 years ago, their capacities have doubled. They have doubled. Thanks to the Chinese investor. I will not tell you more about Bank of China. I did already. And BYD is an interesting company based in Shenzhen, China, which used to manufacture also contract making, Nokia mobile phones starting in 2004 in Komárom, Hungary. Nokia came to an end, and then it also meant the end of the terminated BYD Nokia cooperation, only to leave the plant empty. They vacated it. But what they did is that they converted the plant into an electric bus, an electric truck, a manufacturing company. Right now, electric buses are under or manufacturing in Komárom with the idea to supply the market. Now, going on and seeing the Czech Republic. Now, it's interesting about the Czechs how Chinese investment went by, because the Czechs committed a lot of political mistakes in the previous decades. When I say political errors, mistakes, I mean it from the angle of the Chinese, of course, because they met the Dalai Lama very often, not very much tolerated by the Chinese official position. Even officially, they received the Taiwan political leadership, something that is also not very much or intensively widely tolerated by the People's Republic of China. So, for quite a long time, in terms of the Czech Republic, there was a lull in happiness. There was a lull in happiness. not being very smiley about each other. It was roughly in 2004 when a Chinese group called CEFC, Energy Fund Corporation, is the name broken out, and an energetics company that started buying up shares in Kazakhstan, for example, as a result of which they bought up the entire Rompetrol network in Romania because that was co-owned by Kazakhstan. However, in Czech Republic proper, since the owner of the company had a very good relationship with Miloš Zeman, president of the Czech Republic, Zeman made this Chinese company owner his consultant, his advisor, and he started investing. He bought up Sparta Praha soccer team, football team, also a brewery, several castles, hotels, you name it. Over €1 billion were invested in the Czech Republic. However, the mistake they made was this: the loans used for investment were in excess of their assets. So the president had his doubt about how good and just this particular process is, and Mr. Zeman's friend was imprisoned and still is in prison, and all of his Czech investments went to CITIC, a state-owned investment group. Now, importantly, just to mention this to you, here is this. In the Czech Republic, there was no investment project was with the idea of manufacturing or producing anything, except, of course, except for the brewery. So it was good for nothing. However, if we go to Poland, which is about 4 times the size and population of Hungary, nevertheless, the change of political regime or system, ever since the change of political system, there has never been a China-friend government in Poland, as if Poland had or has never ever recognized that working together with China is an impetus, is an incentive for their economies, unlike Hungary, that has done it since 2002. And even now, it is safe to say that Poland has never had a pro-China or China-friend government. So it is safe to say that relative to the opportunities, there is a vast amount of Chinese investment present in Poland. Obviously, in Warsaw, there's the Luxembourg-based ICDC bank, the single bank that set its foot in a vast country like Poland. And also, may I mention the fund established by the Chinese Exim Bank using Chinese foreign exchange reserves to be used in Eastern Europe for investment. This is the only fund that was relatively or at all active in Poland. And practically speaking, as many as 3 wind-based power plants were erected using Chinese funds or capital, and 2 other Chinese companies' cooperation was also used. Now, certainly it is a welcome fact that renewable energy is used, but other than that, no other significant impact has been witnessed, because relative to Poland's vast size and the volume is tiny. Now, as for Serbia, you may want to know that Serbia in this region is a country that, relative to the above-mentioned countries, is not a member state in the European Union. Thus, a number of projects could have been implemented as planned by China for the rest of the 16 countries, not implemented in the member countries, but very much implemented in Serbia. All it took for Serbia is between the two countries, to two governments, the states, to come to an agreement, no financing limitations, favorable term loans for 15 or 20 or so years of duration. And the only prerequisite that the Chinese stipulated was that at least 85% of the contractors used in the process had to be Chinese. So, an agreement between the two states, the consortium contractors arriving on the scene, 85% of the entire project, investment project, financed by China, as if removing money from one pocket and sliding into the other. And the Serbian state only had to obviously finance 15% of the investment project, committing themselves for 20 years. No problem, if I may add, if we think about this, because if there is trouble in terms of paying back, then no power plant or motorway can be just disassembled and delivered home. It is a fixed asset. But as you see it on the list, because the impact it has on the project has on the environment, for example, coal-based mines, let me also say that even in China, where the most efforts in the world worldwide are made to go to transfer to renewable energy, still, right now, as we speak, 70% of energy used comes from coal mines, coal-based power plants. So we are pretty much in the embryonic state of conversion. Very briefly about Romania and Bulgaria. Why? Because the story or the stories are the same. Never any real far-fetched cooperation has started. Relations good, but no major investment in any of the two countries except for Bulgaria and this particular land hova, this SUV that was assembled, that was started to be assembled in Bulgaria, the first Chinese car company as a result of an investment project with assembly line on foreign soil, but unfortunately it took less than 5 years before this factory announced bankruptcy, because this SUV was, although it was an excellent product, it was not to be placed in any market. I drove it when I worked at the embassy. I liked the car, but somehow it was no success. It never was a breakthrough in Eastern Europe or elsewhere in Europe. In terms of Bulgaria, Romania, no other meaningful investment projects are to be mentioned. Certainly there are commercial companies established in Bulgaria, Romania because of low costs of establishment, but I cannot come up with any trace of lasting and significant investment, and obviously their commercial volume between China and their country is very low. So much in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, that I meant to tell you about the relationship between China and the region here in Eastern Europe, and I'm certainly at your disposal should you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen.